Hello, I'm Jean-Philippe Courtois, and this is the Positive Leadership Podcast, the podcast that helps you grow as an individual, as a leader, and ultimately as a global citizen. Today, I've got the pleasure of speaking with a true trailblazer in the world of responsible AI and positive leadership. She's a technology veteran with nearly 2 decades at companies like Microsoft, Qualcomm, and now she's at the forefront of ensuring that AI is developed with trust, transparency, and human values at the core. So, beyond our company, our guests also advise governments and globalizations on AI policy, from sitting on the US National AI Advisory Committee to working with the OECD and the United Nations. She was just named one of Time's 100 most influential people in AI, and she's widely recognized for her mission to make tech work for everyone. She's the founder and CEO of Credo AI, the company leading the charge in AI governance and ethics. Navrina Singh, everyone, welcome to the Positive Leadership Podcast.
Well, thank you for having me.
So, Navrina, let's start at the beginning. I always love to start with the roots of my guest. And in your case, you grew up in India in what you described as a humble yet empowering family environment with a father who I think served in the military for 40 years and a mother who continually reinvented herself in her career. Can you tell us more and give us some colors about your early life and family background? And what was your childhood like? And the way it has been shaping some of your key values.
Yeah, wow, you're taking me back a long time back. Uh, so I grew up in a very, very humble home in India, and as you articulated, um, I grew up in a family that really didn't come from sciences, that didn't come from
Mm.
technology. They actually came a lot from service. My dad was in the Indian military for 40 years, and my mom was a school teacher, and then she reinvented herself to be an interior designer and a fashion designer. So as
Wow.
you can imagine, between the two of them, there was no ounce of science and technology. But what was really exciting was growing up in this household, there were a few things which I think have shaped me pretty significantly in my career. One was about really thinking about solutions to problems that existed.
Mm.
In growing up in India, we were constrained economically, and obviously, as a woman growing up in India, there were a lot of
Yeah.
societal pressures. So, I think bringing the solution mindset to problems rather than just focusing on problems and getting bogged down by that was a pretty big deal in my family. And then the other thing, which I would say is really rooted in any veteran family, is
Mm.
the deep sense of service, so
Yeah.
it's high accountability and loyalty to people around you so that you can actually lift all the boats rather than just one boat.
Love it. Any story you like to share? I mean, either from a family dinner or an event in your childhood that, kind of left a big impression in your mind and yourself?
Yes, absolutely. There's so many stories, but I still remember the first time my dad had to actually sell a lot of our stuff to get me my first desktop computer.
Mm. Mm.
I got my first computer in 1998.
Wow.
I still remember I think it was IBM Pentium,
Yeah.
chip. It was running Windows 95. But for my household, it cost $1,000, which was a lot
Huge. Huge.
and huge. But I think what was really interesting was my parents always wanted to give me a window into the possibilities. And this computer
Mm.
was a symbolism of like the window into the possibilities of what I could create. And what was fascinating was, I think after 2 days working on this computer, the third day my dad comes to my room and it's dismantled. Like the motherboard is out,
You open
everything's
it.
taken up. I completely opened it and he's like, "Oh my God, I spent so much money. What are you doing?" And I said, I'm looking into the future because I always like to like figure out how things were built. And the reason it was I would say that's a very strong memory for me is
Yeah.
I think it shows the possibilities my parents wanted me to see, but it also showed the little bit of renegade in me. I always had a chip on my shoulder to figure things out and didn't want to live in constraints. And I think it was really encouraged to figure things out, to not take no for an answer, and to go chart
Yeah.
my own path.
Wonderful story, of course, and a number of our guests as well, kind of started opening some of those PCs. So, did you actually bring it back as one piece of hardware, and did you end up developing some apps and developing at home as
Yes.
well, and showing your application to your dad and mom with pride?
It was interesting. Maybe I took a different route. I did put it back together because it was too
Yeah,
expensive. Um,
yeah,
but I think I was known as the robotics kid in the house. I would literally
aha,
dismantle everything, and I would love to create very early, primitive robotic applications at home. So,
okay.
it's yeah, there was a lot of, I would say, firefighting in my house because there were literally things on fire all the time.
So now let's talk about another step, I think, in your life where you made a pretty big leap, where you made a bold move at age 19, right? Leaving India to pursue education in the US, of course. So what was that transition like for you? And how did it feel stepping, of course, into the tech world as a young woman, far from home? How was it
Yeah.
as you landed there?
You know, it's So when I was growing up in India, we moved around pretty much every year because my dad was posted in different posts. And
Hmm.
so we got to move around quite a bit. I think I changed over 10 schools in a span of 9 years. So
Wow.
I had a lot of resilience and adaptability to adapt to new situations, to meet new people.
Yeah.
And when I decided to move to US, my mom actually was not made aware because my dad knew how hard
Hmm.
it would be for her. So one fine day
Hmm.
she wakes up and she sees these luggage outside the bedroom and she's like,
Wow.
"What's happening?" And my dad and I are like, "Oh yeah, I'm moving to US." And
Today.
yes, today. Um,
Wow.
so I would say that was a pretty big shock, but I just assumed this is another step, just like I had done in my childhood.
Yes.
And I'll be honest with you, I didn't recognize the 24-hour plane ride, which, by the way, was my first plane ride ever in my life at the age of 19, leaving
Yes.
India. I didn't realize how consequential that was at that moment. And
Hmm.
I think this is where sometimes not knowing what's on the other end actually is really
Better.
exciting because it's
Yes.
so much better because you just power through it. So when I moved to United States, I went to University of Wisconsin-Madison for my master's in
Hmm.
electrical and computer engineering.
Yeah.
It was a big step, but I never thought it as a big step. I thought it as just another step in my journey to go solve big problems. And I think that
Hmm.
mindset has always helped me because I just take the next step to solving big
Yeah.
problems.
Wow, that's a pretty amazing story when your mom doesn't know that you're gonna leave the country. she
Yes.
must she must had some pretty big emotional shock, I'm sure, that day and after, right? Anyway, so stepping into a new country, into a very much a male-dominated tech industry, probably has not been easy for you, Navrina. And you mentioned, I think, in your early career as an engineer, that there were not many women in leadership roles, and the few that you found, you hold them tightly, right, with you, close to you. So, despite the odds, you not only built a successful career, we'll discuss that together, but you also discovered a passion, I think, that would define your mission. In your case, the pivotal moment that you talked about when you started working with AI, I think around 2011, and notice, of course, what could be done with AI. So, love to understand that light bulb moment, what happened at that moment in your career, because I think that's probably a profound moment in terms of the way you evolved after that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because even though now I say that's a moment, but there were so many other million moments that led to that moment.
Yeah.
And so I went to school in Wisconsin-Madison. Right out of school, I joined Qualcomm in the research and development team, and initially building cell site modems, which are essentially these base
Hmm.
stations that connect to your cell phones.
Yep. Yep.
And I joined that company because again, for me, it's the solution that excites me. And the solution there was, wow, I'm actually creating the fabric that is going to connect the world. And for me,
Hmm.
that was really powerful because, again, growing up in India, moving to US, away from family, I saw that as a connective tissue. So the mission of
Yeah.
Qualcomm was something that I got really, I would say, excited about. So I spent the first 8 years at Qualcomm in the research and development team, building some amazing technologies, which are foundation of today's
Yeah.
mobile tech. But then again, fast forward, I moved to product management and then was the head of innovation for the company.
Hmm.
And there was a very interesting moment in 2012 talking about amazing women AI pioneers. Dr. Feifei Li had just released ImageNet, which
Hmm.
was one of the largest data sets which of labeled images. And
Yes.
this ImageNet became sort of like the foundation of how we started to understand not only GPUs can be applied to solving deep learning problems,
Hmm.
but suddenly it felt like even on something as small as a cell phone, you could do very powerful computer vision. And so in 2011, I would say
Hmm.
AlexNet and Dr. Feifei Li's work really became pivotal to how we were thinking about what's
Yeah.
the next frontier of compute and connectivity powered with, a lot of
Hmm.
computer vision technology that we can bring to some of the products we were working on. And the reason it was pivotal was prior to that, like AI had existed for 47, 50
For
years,
sure.
right? So it
Yeah.
wasn't
Yeah. Yeah.
new. But I
Yeah.
think it was a lot of ingredients coming together. It was the
Hmm.
label data set, it was the GPUs that we could now have, rather than
Yeah.
applying to gaming, planning to apply to deep learning. It was a lot of
Yes.
things coming together. And I would say
Hmm.
that moment was really important because my team helped build the first robotics development platform at Qualcomm
Hmm.
that then became a very interesting way for us to test out what the art of possible in manufacturing, in
Hmm.
cell phone manufacturing.
Yes.
And so, yeah, a big moment for us in 2011 and beyond.
That was really the moment where you started digging pretty deeply into AI.
Yes, I am a hardware engineer by training, and so I
Yeah.
would say this 2011 moment was this big aha that, wow, I can see where the puck is going. The puck is going in this new machine learning technology, and guess what? That's not going to happen on an on-prem. It's going to happen in
Yes.
cloud, and that actually
Yes.
was another pivotal moment to move to Microsoft, because Microsoft was taking off and then leading the cloud revolution. So there
Yeah.
was no better place to bring the cloud technologies and machine learning technologies and create the next.
Yeah, that was certainly an important moment, and we'll come back to that in terms of leadership lesson as well later on, if you don't mind, Navrina. I think you also said, we'll discuss that further as well, that with AI you also discover a woman and some other groups who are essentially becoming invisible in the data being used. So can you describe that realization? What time you found out that, well, actually my group,
Yeah.
one of the many groups, is not really included in that view of the world. So, what was that
Yeah.
moment? And yeah,
So there were a couple, again, as I mentioned, there were a couple of early moments. There was some research that we were doing initially at Qualcomm, which was looking at early vocoder designs. And what was interesting was in these early vocoder designs, essentially what we found very quickly was that women voices were getting chopped off because women
yeah,
generally speak at higher frequency than
mm,
male. And as we sort of tried to figure out why was that the case, it actually just went back to, you know, I think products are a reflection of people who worked on it. And as we
yeah,
traced it back, we found that the testers were all male engineers.
all male, yes,
So, it's interesting. Obviously, when you have a data set which is really focused on certain demographic and you've not tested for remaining demographic, you
yes,
end up missing it. And I would say that that was an important moment. But what became very interesting was we were building these facial recognition systems in the AI and
yep,
research team at Microsoft. And we had this prototype that was in the hallway. And every time I would walk by this prototype, it would one either not recognize me as an Indian woman,
Wow.
or it would always mistake me for another Indian
Hmm.
woman.
Yeah.
And so what was really interesting was I was like, wow, this facial recognition system that we have, which is a prototype, which we are going to put out in the world, cannot reliably even, you know, uncover who I am, and I'm one of the project leads
Yes.
here. So I think, again, going back to there, as we sort of went back to the provenance of what the problem might be, I think it was a
Yes.
combination. One, it was a data set that we had. It wasn't demographically
Yes.
diverse. It did not
Yes.
include every person. But the second was, again, the people who were building those products, majority certain demographics. And
Yeah.
so diversity became a pretty important conversation for me in building tech.
And so, could you share maybe a story or a moment when you confronted some of your colleagues, probably male colleagues, who are part of that development team, to look at the reality of what was going on actually with the model,
Yeah.
and how that confrontation actually worked?
So, it's very interesting because I don't think gender plays a role in engineering as much as we think it is. And but
Yeah.
there was a recognition, and I think this is the a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, the need to always
Mm,
prove that I can build stuff. Because in India, growing up, there was maybe an assumption that women are not smart. They are just going to be housewives. They are not going
yeah.
to end up being scientists and technologists. And so I would say that that chip of the on my shoulder has existed, but I don't think this was when I found some of these problems with my team.
Yeah.
I think the discussion was actually very, very mature and very scientific based. It's
Mm,
like, what can we
mm,
do? Where are the gaps? And what can we
yes.
do to actually make this technology more robust, more
Yeah.
reliable, especially as we were starting to see this early innings of machine learning
Mm,
and AI and the scale
yes.
and impact that this technology would have, right? So
Mm,
it was literally, putting your engineering mindset
yeah.
and solution mindset back on to see what could we do to solve this problem now that we've uncovered
Yeah.
this problem. And I would say
Yes.
that was the genesis of trusted AI
Okay.
way back in 2017, 2018 for me.
Okay. So actually, before we get into the Credo AI discussion, of course, Navrina, I'd love you to reflect a little bit on kind of your leadership insights, key lessons you learned working with two, I think, great companies, Qualcomm, Microsoft, obviously. What are the takeaways that you've been bringing to your CEO role now, an entrepreneur in Credo AI? How would you share that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, as you know, it's very interesting. A lot of our early childhood ends up shaping who you become, and I would say a
Yeah.
lot of these leadership lessons are things I saw in my household. And one of the core leadership principles, which is very, I would say, deeply ingrained in me, is this notion of servant leadership. When you
Mm,
have assembled some of the best minds in the world, you have to create a psychologically safe environment for them to be able to lead. And you, as a
yes.
leader, have to lead from front. So I would never ask my team to do something that I can't do. Now, can I do it as good
Mm.
as them? Maybe not. But I would say that really showing up for people and no person left behind is a very important leadership value that is not only something I've seen in Microsoft and Qualcomm, but something that I embrace at Credo AI. And I would say
Yeah.
that high accountability. It's I work very hard. I have a lot of
Mm.
discipline. I wake up at 3 a.m. I work till 7 p.m. So this whole new discussion around 996, I don't even
Yes.
understand because I've done that my entire life. So I
Yes.
think as a leader, it's not about the values that you just talk about, it's the values that you demonstrate in your actions. And
That
so
you
a
do.
lot of
Yeah.
those values about
Mm.
hard work, I work very hard. It's a lot of values around how do you keep yourself accountable to the outcomes even when
Yes.
you've screwed up, and how do you take
Mm.
ownership. So for me, I would say it is really living your values through actions and showing that to your team is a
Mm.
pretty big way that we've
Mm.
created the culture here at Credo AI.
And you think this is actually something you learn quite a bit by showing by being mentor maybe, or by also doing some of that yourself at Microsoft and Qualcomm?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think I can ask someone to do something if I'm not living and breathing those values.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I throughout my career, whether it is deep accountability, whether it is really thinking about execution, whether it is
Yeah.
committing to something and following through, whether it is having that customer obsession around a problem and making
Mm-hmm.
sure your customers are
Yep.
successful. And what we've done at Credo AI is we've codified that in our Credo, which is very important to us. Everything
Yep.
from result oriented to execution focus to making sure that we are creating an environment for the best people to do their best work because, we are creating something really groundbreaking here.
Yes.
So I, as a leader, have to live those values and show those values in action rather than just in a blog post or in a marketing moment.
Yes. So let's get into, of course, this next chapter in your life. But I like us to kind of focus on that moment, which I think happened during the pandemic in 2020, if I'm not mistaken, where in the middle of that pandemic, you decided to found Credo AI and say bye-bye to Microsoft. Interesting enough, I just recorded an episode which will be posted before yours, so it's okay, with Peggy Johnson. You remember Peggy, I'm sure.
Yes.
And of course, and Peggy is now, as you know, the CEO of an amazing robotics company. And she shared that she also made that bold move during the pandemic. So I don't know if there was something special happening in terms of reflection, but tell us more, Navrina, about that moment. What came to your mind and why you decided to move on and, and become an entrepreneur?
Yeah. So, there are, and I think this goes back to, again, a little bit, I'll keep bringing it back to my upbringing. In India, when I was growing up, safety was very important. It's
Mm,
as humans, we are either driven by ambition or we are driven by fear. And
yeah.
I would say that in my life, I've been driven by both, like the ambition to
Mm,
create something more of myself and to uncover new technologies or build new technologies, but also the fear of being stuck and fear of not innovating and fear of not disrupting.
yeah.
And so after while I was at Microsoft, I learned from some of the best and learned from obviously Satya and his leadership on, if you recall, it was all about driving clarity and
Yeah.
energizing people.
Yes.
And as I saw machine learning and AI take off, what became very clear is, wow, we are at the start of a technology which is going to change humanity. And
Mm,
from my experience over the last decade prior to that, I had seen everything that could go wrong when we don't take accountability.
yeah.
And so in 2019, I really started to think about whose responsibility is it going to
Mm,
be to get AI right? And as
yes.
I looked inside the hood at Microsoft and the way we were building products, all the way to things
Mm,
happening outside, I think there was enthusiasm for technology, but there was no
yeah.
enthusiasm for accountability when things go
Mm,
wrong.
mm,
And I think for me it became a really question on, wow, in my entire life I've been driven by the ambition or the fear. Here I really need to lean in on myself and my
yes.
ideas and then go and create something which can keep this technology very accountable. Obviously,
Mm.
didn't know what was coming next year in terms of the pandemic, so the wrong timing, or maybe even right as I reflect
Yeah.
back. But in
Yeah.
2019, left Microsoft to take a bet on an idea that I've had for, past 7, 8 years to really make sure that
Yes.
we bring in accountability to this technology.
So let's get into it now, Navrina. Let's talk about Credo AI. And for our listeners who are not necessarily all coming from tech, by the way, so they come from all kind of horizons across the world. Can you actually explain what does Credo AI do? What's your mission? And what is the problem you're trying to solve?
Yeah, we have a very big mission to ensure that AI is always in service of humanity. And what
Mm,
that means is, at the end of the day, I'm a big believer AI is one of the most powerful tools that we are ever going to have that helps us in the evolution of who we end up becoming. And what
Yep.
that means is everything from this future of abundance to the future of growth and how humans are able to innovate very quickly in this new world is going to be all powered by AI. But only if we are able to
Mm.
steer and guide this technology the way we want it to. And I would say
Right.
that was really the foundation of our mission is can
Mm.
we ensure that this technology continues to work for us and not against us? And
Yes.
so, in terms of our product, we are a software provider. So, a venture
Yep.
backed company, we've built a software platform that
Hmm.
basically does three things. It's one is, as you can imagine, what does good look like? What are you going to make
Hmm.
sure in terms of measuring these systems is still very undefined. It's very use case specific. So this
Yes.
alignment problem in terms of what you need to
Mm.
measure is something we solve for. The second thing is once you've aligned on what you need to solve for, can you
Yep.
measure the risk within that context and can you mitigate that risk? And then
Yep.
lastly, as you can imagine, many of the companies, Microsoft has a set of values, IBM has a
Mm.
set of values, but also there's a lot of guardrails outside in the world, whether it is AI standards or regulations. So how do you
Yes.
make sure that every AI that you're building aligns with the values that you as the company hold or you as an ecosystem hold through regulations and
Yep.
standard? And so we help you get to compliance with that. And so our software right now is used by global 2000 organizations, everyone from PepsiCo, MasterCard, Cisco, McKinsey,
Mm.
and others. But we also include, we partner with great technology companies like Microsoft,
Mm.
Databricks, and others. So,
And
really, just
others.
at the onset of creating this transformational trust in AI.
No, it's fascinating. So let's get even deeper into the discussion, talking about governance in particular, right? Over the past decade, AI governance has evolved from broad ethical tenets to formal risk frameworks. You talk about risk management. Visionaries like Yoshua Bengio push early ethical 10-point guidelines, the Montreal Declaration, and then international bodies follow suit with UNESCO in 2021, OECD's non-binding AI principles in 2019. And alongside these technical standards emerged, the US National Institute of Standards and Technology published an AI risk management framework to guide organizations in risk-based AI deployment. With so many guidelines, because there are so many more, actually, I didn't, it's a long list, which are which are coming in place now. Where do we stand globally, Navrina, on reaching a commonly agreed AI governance framework, or is that pure utopia?
So I think maybe this is a more nuanced discussion than the world and media makes it out to be. But at the end of the
Okay.
day, we at Credo AI strongly believe that you cannot control something you can't measure. And
Yeah.
everything that we talk about, whether it's in a risk management framework from NIST or whether it is
Yeah.
in a regulation like EU AI Act, has to be scientifically measured and it has
Hmm.
to be embedded in the way that AI is being built and deployed. And so if you sort of ground that in those first principles of how you want to build an AI system, a lot of the declarations and risk management frameworks have certain common ground principles. And so the
Yeah.
common ground principles are one, I think you can put guardrails, but you have to understand the context of use. So the
Mm.
utopia part is I don't think you can have a peanut butter approach to solving all of AI
Everything.
with
Yes.
one set of guardrails, right?
Doesn't work.
And
Doesn't
it
work.
doesn't work. And so one
Yeah.
size does not fit all in AI. And if the expectation is that there is going to be one beautiful regulation globally applied, that's not going to happen. What is
No.
going to happen and what is the reality, and that results in a lot of fragmentation, is
Yeah.
we will see industry specific,
Mm.
application specific, very measurable guardrails emerging
Yeah.
from standards and hopefully regulation, and also driven by companies and organizations. And I think that is a reality we need to be okay with. to
Yes.
even get to this future. And if I may, there's a second reality that we need to get to is similar to
Yep.
building AI or software. We know that it is an iterative process, that you're never going to get it right the first time. So you put
Of
technology
course.
out, you get feedback from
Yep.
customers, you iterate on it. I think we need to give a little bit of grace, even in policy making and standards, that we will need to put something out, iterate over it. So the adaptive
Yep.
policy making is something we need to get okay with and start to put mechanisms in place to create that. And we're not there yet.
Yes, for sure. I mean, lot more to come. Any particular view on the EU AI Act, which has been talked a lot about?
Yeah, I mean, yesterday was interesting. It's EUA Act has been postponed by almost a year in terms of enforcement.
Yes.
I would say the viewpoint is, again, we have to be very careful in terms of what are we trying to solve for here. We are trying to
Yeah.
solve for, and this is something that we do with enterprises. We want to give everyone a tool to figure out what the risks within these systems are so that you can actually leverage the opportunity from
Yeah.
these systems effectively. And I think EU AI Act, the AI risk framework that they have is an interesting one, everything from
Mm.
low risk all the way to prohibitive risk. In terms of implementation, there is so many gaps. How do you figure out
Yes.
what the deployers need to do, what developers need to do, certifying body, the right standards? I think there's a lot of work that needs to happen, but I think we need to again be very careful about just throwing
Mm.
out regulation for the sake of regulation versus
Yeah.
those specific guardrails that we can
Use
create.
case
Yes,
guardrails
use
by
case
industry.
based. Exactly.
By the way, talking about those particular use case or industry case, would you like to share one of the industries where you see some great work being done on AI governance that is maybe paving the way for others?
Oh, absolutely. So we right now work across 9 different sectors from healthcare, pharma, insurance, all the way to
Yeah.
CPG. And let me give you a simple example, which is sort of horizontal, is around customer service chatbots. And what we
Mm.
are seeing is whether you are in healthcare or whether you are in financial services, everyone has a customer service chatbot.
Yes.
And I would say that the customer service chatbot is such a strong representation of the value and the brand that you as an organization have. So you want to
Indeed.
make sure that that interface with the consumer is trusted, it is fair, it is reliable. So all the
Yeah.
characteristics that you are looking to govern
Hmm.
actually fall really well in this use case. And so a lot of our
Interesting.
customers are using Credo AI for managing governance of the customer service chatbots that they're launching
Yep.
so that
Yep.
not only the company values are
Hmm.
safeguarded within that, but also there's transparency in how have you built this AI system that is interacting with a very important
Right.
stakeholder that is your consumer.
No, very interesting case. Plus, this is such a transversal case across any industries at the same time. So I'm sure your know-how in addressing that is probably very helpful for many businesses around the world. So looking back at the last few years, what are the milestone achievement that you're the most proud of, Navrina, since starting Credo AI? And yes, and are there any moments that stand out where you felt, yes, we are really making a difference now?
Wow. I would say every morning I wake up really thinking we are making a difference. So there was no AI governance category in 2019. We created the AI governance category. We
Hmm.
actually educated global governments on what is AI governance and why it is paramount. G7 using AI governance was a lot of the
Hmm.
work that we've been doing on the ground,
Wow.
educating public company boards on why AI governance should not only be a priority for enterprises,
Yep.
but also now starting to get reflected in their 10K filings and their earning reports. That's a lot of our work. But I would say the proudest moment for me is
Yep.
that we have been able to constantly attract very mission aligned people who
Hmm.
believe in the power of this technology to create an amazing future for us, but are also
Hmm.
grounded in the fact that we have to put the right governance structures and accountability structures across this technology. And honestly, that is the biggest privilege of my life to have, Credo AI team members. Right now, we are 60 strong and growing very rapidly to really make sure that this technology, which everyone is
Yeah.
not only excited about, but it is going to change our lives for better, is safeguarded, is trusted, and is accountable to humanity.
Wow, that's a big mission for sure for 60 people and more to come. And to keep them aligned, as you said, because one by one, as you know, people, individuals can change the culture as well. So there's, I'm sure we'll come back to that later on in
Yeah.
terms of leadership. Now, you mentioned, Navrina, of course, your involvement with many governments, because I think in addition to running Credo AI, you are taking on roles like advising the US government on National AI Advisory Committee, working as well with the UN's AI board, and even guiding AI initiative at Mozilla, if I'm not mistaken. So, what do you hope to achieve through your work on all those national, international bodies? Beyond, of course, showing some thought leadership coming from Credo AI and your company.
So, I think companies come and go, missions stay. And I think the mission here is so important. So, our work really at the intersection of regulation, policymakers, standard setting bodies, and the AI technology companies is really a recognition and realization that trust in this technology is critical. And so our hope is that we are innovating with eyes wide open, and we are
Mm,
innovating with the understanding that everyone believes this is the most transformational technology, and it
yeah.
is going to create this future of abundance only if we make sure we have the right guardrails around it. I
Mm,
don't know if you just read the report from Anthropic yesterday around the first
mm,
completely AI generated cyber attack that Anthropic's Claude just had. It is a fascinating read because
mm.
for the first time, AI was able to independently, with very light touch from humans,
Yep.
target cloud infrastructure from Anthropic and do so over maybe like 3 to 4 days, targeting 30
Mm.
different endpoints, all run by
Wow.
AI. So we are entering a very interesting world where not only like in terms of cybersecurity and our national security posture,
Yes.
but when the I would say the war is all going to be AI based. How do
Yes.
you
Yes.
really make sure that these AI agents actually are representing our objectives and goals appropriately? And that is the mission that Credo AI really wants to keep bringing to forefront for everyone.
Yeah, it's obviously scary, but it's also a great segue into my next conversation as well with you, Navrina. Today's leading powers are forging very different AI regimes in the world. We just touched on the EU, but if you look, of course, at the US and China, each one of them have a very different type of ideology and, of course, a view of the world. The US is emphasizing market-led innovation, deregulation in many ways. Europe, we just discussed, emphasize rights and legal safeguards across everything, which seems like mission impossible. But anyway, that's a different discussion. And China treats AI as a tool of state control and security, and also entails their role in the world. So, where do you see AI governance heading worldwide over the next decade? That's probably too long of a time. And will we converge, or we should just forget that, on some common principles, right, to govern the world with AI, given all the risks coming with it as well?
I think this is why I keep going, I keep thinking about your first question you asked me on today's podcast was about tell me
Yeah.
about your upbringing and your
Hmm.
your initial life. And I think a lot
Yeah.
of what we are going to see in this technology is the values that we all hold dearly. And
Hmm.
I don't think that there's going to be convergence. I think there is going to be a lot of sovereign AI that ends up emerging
Yes.
with the
Yeah.
values that countries and people hold themselves accountable to.
Hmm.
Having said that, I think again to guide this technology in a way that
Yep.
serves,
Yep.
our purposes, whether it is United States or our allies like Europe, what
Yes. Yep.
becomes really critical is I think there are some common ground principles. And again, as an engineer, I keep going back to those common ground principles are grounded in
Hmm.
very evidence-based measurements. As an
Yeah.
example, Do you have a risk management framework? Do you have
Hmm.
quality management system? Can you actually figure out the provenance of your data sets? Have you done
Yep.
enough
Yep.
testing? What does that testing look
Yep.
like? And then obviously aligning to what does good mean for you as a country, as a
Yes.
company, as a team. And I think
Yep.
we are not going to have one set of converged AI. I think it's going to be AI which is
Yes.
um, really reflecting the values of the builders.
No, I actually completely converge with you, at least in what I see across the world. Living myself in Europe, as you know, but having many friends in different continents as well. This is shaping exactly as you said. I think based on the local, national heritage, culture, and also political, of course, ambitions. So I like now to shift gear a little bit and broaden discussion. I think on something that you're pretty passionate about, which is AI equity. The UN's Governing AI for Humanity report that you may have read, it was published a couple of years ago and updated, says we must harness AI in ways that leave no one behind. It recommends global action, capacity building, funding AI literacy and R&D in resource-limited regions of the world where there's none of that, so nations can engage in AI governance. And so clearly to avoid another digital divide again with the global south. So how can the world, you think, can ensure that AI benefits all countries and people fairly? And how should recommendations like those from the UN that I just talked about be operationalized? And is it like again an utopia, or can it happen?
I I think maybe I'll present a non-popular response here, which is I think
Yep.
there's an issue of access. Can we make this technology available to everyone? But the second is the issue of what do people who then have access end up doing with it? Because if you as a human don't end up using AI and even after you have access, that's on you and you are going to be left behind. And I think that is
Yes.
the reality that we are living in right now. So I think this is a very complex topic with no clear
Yep.
answer. But I worry that if folks are not if they have access to AI and if they are not using AI, I think we are going to see a very
Yep.
different world than if they actually end up using AI. Having said that, I think this becomes a really important question. What can governments do in terms of access to technology?
Yes.
Something we work a lot, especially in US, around is AI literacy. Because again,
Yep.
we are finding that there's an emerging gap in people not only understanding what this technology can do, but also using this technology. And
Using
then
it.
there's
Yes.
and using it responsibly and safely. So that's
Mm.
where we come
Yes.
in, and we've created something called as forward deployed AI governance experts. These forward deployed
Yep.
AI governance experts, they go and educate our the
Mm.
companies we are working with, the people within those organizations, not only about how do you use this technology, but how do you use it in a responsible and safe way. So I think this is
Yeah.
sorry, I'm not getting to your answer because it is so
No, but
complex.
it's complex. I agree, and I think you said it rightly. I think Navrina, I mean, number one, there's of course an issue about making AI accessible to a number of regions in the world, communities that don't have any access to it today. Number one, that's a problem to solve, I think. And number two, then how do you do that in a way that is going to empower people to augment their capacity by having a proper training, skills, mindset, and so on, which is another pretty big problem as well. So I'm not trying to solve the problem myself. I can't, obviously, but I wanted to get your views on that. Just continuing a bit this discussion about ethical AI. Obviously, and you said that all along this discussion, right? Ethical AI must also reflect diverse voices. You would agree, I guess, with that. UNESCO's framework calls for inclusive and ethical AI that respects human rights and equality. And yet, many AI models today echo the biases of their training data. We all know that. And you gave us an example early on this conversation about gender data as an example early on. And for example, and I can see that myself having been traveling to many countries in the world for my past life with Microsoft and still being in touch with many different countries and nationalities across the globe. There's still many LLMs that don't at all reflect those different cultures and languages. So, what are the development processes? What is the way you think that truly responsible player while developing AI models should make those voices heard in terms of the training of the data to make sure that it actually is relevant for people using it, in the global south or wherever it is in Africa, in some remote provinces in India as well. People might not even speak English, right? I mean, how do you make sense of that for them?
Yeah, and this is, I would say, such an important and interesting problem many companies are trying to solve right now in terms of not only diverse data sets, but really well labeled data sets. We have emerging companies like Mercor and others show up in this space.
Yep.
I'll give you a very interesting example. I was on the board of
Yep.
Mozilla a couple of years
Yep.
ago, and one of the things that we were doing at Mozilla at that time was a project called Common Voice. And Common
Mm.
Voice, the whole notion of that project, which we ended up transferring to NVIDIA, and now NVIDIA owns it. And the Common Voice project was really focused on how do we very quickly get data from
Yep.
either geographies or people that otherwise are not contributing to the data sets that
Right.
these large language models are getting powered by. And I
Yes.
think that was a very concerted effort to go into, for example, the American Indian community, to go into Global South, to start collecting data
Yep.
sets there. Because at the end of the day, these technologies, for them to again work well, have to be
Yep.
representative of all the folks. And I think we need more initiatives like that. We need better initiatives around data set collection, but we also need better structures to share these data sets across
Yep.
country boundaries, because we've seen in the past, and we've worked on a lot of projects where you might be able to collect data set, let's say in India or Singapore, but you can't actually train systems that you're building in US on that data set. So I think there needs
Right.
to be some sort of a data trust that needs to be created to be able to solve that problem. and
Yes.
and there are some new, there's really fascinating companies that have started to
Mm.
leverage humans to start labeling data sets coming from all these, global south, as well as
Yes.
communities that otherwise are not participating. And I think that is really critical.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think there's also a pretty big geopolitical challenge ahead of us, right? Which is depending on the models and who is going to drive that, meaning China or the US, maybe Europe as well, who knows? It could change really the shape of that
Yeah.
AI reality in many parts of the world, right? How do you see that today, given, of course, the fact that you are part of that very thriving US startup ecosystem, right, of AI?
Yeah, I think, I hope we don't get to a state, but I think we are getting to a state where countries are recognizing that AI is their massive, big asset. And so the
Mm.
creation of either sovereign clouds or national AI stacks or national
Yeah,
data trust is, I think, the next frontier. And we are going to
yeah,
actually start seeing countries invest deeply in their AI
in
stack.
there.
And then making sure that their AI stack is actually the one that sort of ends up
That's
winning.
right.
But we are in very early innings there to really see what the outcome
Mm.
is.
Okay, so we'll rediscuss that in a couple of years to see what happens in in the future. So this prompts a related question for AI, which is of course all about trust, and you discussed trust in the beginning, right? Which is the foundation, by the way, of human relationships. It's one of the core values as well of positive leadership, starting with trust and the way you create trust. How can people similarly trust AI systems? How do we establish and measure trust in AI, Navrina?
Yeah, this is something that we live and breathe day in, day out. So I think uh, there are different stakeholders in the AI value
Yep.
chain. And I think for that different stakeholders, how you engender trust would look very differently. So let me explain
Mm.
what I mean by that. If you are an AI engineer within, let's say, a company that is building AI systems, there the AI trust is a very different conversation because it is really grounded in How are you testing and measuring these systems? And have you done everything
Right.
in your capacity to reduce the risk that you
Mm.
understand? Whether, and if it is a new emergent threat that you don't know how to mitigate, have
Mm.
you publicly disclosed it?
Mm.
Now, think about another stakeholder who might be a business stakeholder within the company but does not understand AI. For them,
Mm.
and then this is the assets that Credo AI creates, we create compliance and governance reports that, let's
Yeah.
say, an executive who is not AI experienced or business stakeholders coming from compliance and risk don't really understand the technology, but now they
Mm.
can get these assets to say, oh, if I deploy this system, looks like my reputational risk is 10% higher than if I make these
Mm.
changes. Or if I
Yes.
deploy this system, I am not going to be in compliance with ISO 42001, so I can't deploy the system.
Yeah.
And then there is another set of stakeholder, which is your boards. Your boards need
Yes.
very different kind of information, which is
Mm.
have your systems that you are bringing a lot of top line growth to your business, have they been
Yeah.
audited appropriately? Have they been audited by third party auditors? What are the outcomes of that audit? Then there's another stakeholder, which is your end consumer, the one who's
Yeah.
interacting with that customer service chatbot. They
Mm.
want to
Mm.
know, how have you done the testing of the system? Because if my child is going to be using this chatbot, I want to
Mm.
make sure you have the parental controls to
Yeah.
make sure my child is protected. And then you have
Mm.
another set of stakeholders, which is the policymakers and regulators who want to
Yeah.
understand, if you are a very large, powerful foundation model providers, what does your system cards look like? What kind of red teaming have you done? Where did you get your data sources from?
Yes.
What are you building? So I think I'm just trying to articulate the complexity of
Yeah.
stakeholders and the level of
Multi-layered kind of
transparency.
framework.
Exactly.
Yes.
the
Yeah.
the multi-layered disclosure and
Mm.
transparency reporting you
Yeah.
need to provide with the right level of insights so that every
Yeah.
stakeholder can actually understand it and build trust with that technology.
Thanks. It helps, I think, for all our listeners, hopefully visualizing some kind of trust system, the way it's built around AI. Now let's shift gears and talk about and having conversation about leadership, Navrina. AI is not just changing tech departments and different use cases, it's also changing the very landscape of work and leadership. So from your vantage point, how is AI changing the way we work and lead? And you can talk about your own
Yeah.
experience, obviously. You can talk about some of your clients as well. What are the new skills or mindset that leaders need to thrive in this AI driven era?
It's, I would say the past 2 years, we've been on this amazing roller coaster where one core characteristic is becoming really critical, which is, can you actually accept change and use that change as a growth driver? And then one of my
Yeah.
favorite quotes is, change is inevitable, but growth is optional. And we are seeing this within a lot of enterprises right now, that companies
Yeah.
who are not embracing AI, companies who are not providing AI literacy to their employees for this reinvention,
Yeah.
who understand that this change has already happened, but are not bringing growth mindset to really
Yeah.
embrace this new way of working, they are either going to not exist tomorrow or they're going to be left behind. And so I would say that the biggest leadership quality that I'm seeing is a
Mm.
lot of growth mindset by not only leaders of organizations, but also people within those organizations
Mm.
to say, okay, there is something new, something has changed, but now can
Yeah.
I adapt to it rather than just being resentful about this change? And if you're not able to
Yes.
adapt, I don't think you're going to be able to thrive in this new age of AI.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think it really creates a big stress on many organizations, many leadership teams, many boards as well. By the way, I also sit on some couple of boards. I can relate to that.
Yeah.
In a way, I mean, the way you describe it, leaders today need to be both tech savvy and also deeply human savvy. That's my words, and clearly that talks a lot about some of the core values I'm trying to kind of share with this positive leadership conversation I'm having with different guests. So I'd love to understand with your own perspective and your own leadership at Credo AI and beyond, how do you integrate attributes like empathy, care, for your people's well-being. You talk about your 60 wonderful people working with you in Navrina. And can you share some examples about the way you ensure a human-centric approach in such a high-tech, fast-paced environment?
I love your framing. I don't think we are going to be successful in this new age of era if we don't embrace what are the great qualities that humans have. And I think a lot of those great qualities that humans have is around empathy and creative problem solving and
Yep.
optimism and always trying to figure out
Yep.
solutions. So the way I would say, I'm a big believer in bias towards action. So you just have to live and
Yep.
breathe these, right? So at not only my company, but the companies that I have been at, how do you actually enable individuals to, rather than saying you all have to become AI experts, maybe
Yeah.
there's a reframing of question, how do you bring your expertise and your values to AI? So even if, let's say, you might be someone from humanities, you might be a
Yep.
compliance manager, or you might be coming from financial your
Yep.
financial teams, how do you bring that expertise to AI? Because I truly believe that in this new world of artificial intelligence, bringing that and having that expertise is how we are going to win. It's not just through learning
Yes.
AI that we are going to win. So we do a lot of work around encouraging people to think about, yes, AI is a tool, but what is that special sauce or the special expertise you have that we can actually bring to 10x with artificial intelligence?
Hmm.
And that has actually worked really well, at least at Credo AI and the companies that we are working with, to help with that reinvention that this AI is demanding.
Hmm. So, building on that and kind of circling back to our very early discussion, diversity, you shared that one of your core credos is diversity is not an option, it is a requirement, which brings again empathy into the organization. And this reminds me actually about discussion I had with Amy Edmondson on this podcast, where she discussed psychological safety, which is about creating an environment where people feel trusted and supported, even when they are taking risk or actually admitting failures. And I think you made a point to build a diverse team at Credo AI and to champion women and underrepresented groups in tech as well. So, why is diversity so critical in the context technology of AI? And or have you actually achieved that or achieving that today with your Credo team, Navrina?
It's diversity is, it can take on different form. It's not just gender diversity, but it's your
For
background
sure.
diversity, it's your cognitive diversity. And I have just found that surrounding myself with people who don't think like me actually makes me better.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
everyone is coming from the same experiences, with the same background, with the same learning,
Yep.
I don't think we are going to grow. And in my career, I have found that we've actually done our best work when there is a healthy debate and challenge of each other's
Hmm.
ideas, when we are pushing ourselves to change our thinking around a topic just because someone else presented a different point of view because they are seeing it from a different
Yep.
angle. And I think that's what diversity is. Diversity is making ideas better because someone has a different viewpoint or a different angle of the problem. And I think
Yes.
in this complex world of artificial intelligence, we need to be able to look at this technology from all different angles so that we
Hmm.
can actually come up creatively with the right solutions. As an example, a
Yep.
hacker is going to think about and work with
Hmm.
AI so differently than
Hmm.
maybe a teacher who might just use this as
Yeah.
a co-pilot is going to use it so differently than a student who just needs help on an
Yep.
assignment. So how do you bring in this hacker teacher student together, and you will actually
Hmm.
end up creating a very different product and a different solution. So for me, diversity is, I think it's the baseline to create good products that solve real problems and to innovate that is going to help us actually leapfrog into this next world with artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I agree with you. And so this is a kind of casting you do with your team as well. You've got teachers, you've got hackers, you've got developers as well. Very diverse type of people.
Yeah, our team is very, obviously, we have our engineering brains, we have our AI
Yeah.
brains. We actually have policy team. We have
Hmm.
folks coming from external affairs because a lot of what
Yep.
we are trying to do is bridge this gap
Cross
between technology and policy and standards.
policies.
And
Yeah.
so I would say that we have seen this very interesting diversity mindset when you bring in a policymaker, a regulator, an AI engineer to the bar, and you're like, what are
Yeah.
they going to talk about and what are they going to build? And
Yeah.
they're building trusted technology.
Yeah. So continuing on this leadership discussion, Navrina, beyond every purposeful leader, there's often some influencers or people who've been either influencing, opening doors, and basically model sometimes leadership for the mentee in terms of matters. On the podcast, I had someone you may know, not Melody Upson,
Yeah.
who talked a lot about some of the mentors really shaped her life in a way, in her career. So I'd love to hear you talking about mentors, the people maybe who have influenced you in your life, and it could be business, related or not. It could be friends. Tell us more about some of the key people, mentors yeah, that you learn from.
Yeah, I'm a big believer that no one can succeed alone. It really takes a set of cheerleaders around you who might be mentors, but more times are advocates that
Yeah,
are on this journey with you, like not only hyping you up, but talking about your value when you're not in the room. And so I am the product of every mentor that's bet on me, every advocate that championed for me. And I would say, it's a combination. You mentioned Melody and you mentioned Peggy Johnson.
yep,
They've not
yep.
only been great mentors, but have really opened doors for me.
Mm,
Satya has been a huge mentor for me, obviously learning his leadership style. So throughout my
yeah,
career, very early on, Dr. Irwin Jacobs, founder of Qualcomm, I got to learn from him. So it's
yeah,
and especially from him, like someone who can actually innovate. Age is not a limit. You can actually innovate at any
yeah.
age. It's been really inspiring. So I wouldn't say that it's just one person, but it's like a group of people. But I would say that a big part of who I am is actually shaped by very, very strong women in my life. Starting
Mm,
as early as with my grandmother. My grandmother was my biggest
okay,
advocate, where
yeah.
anytime I was down, she was like, "Oh my God, what a great stepping stone. Go make something better happen," right? So she
Yeah,
never
yeah.
saw barriers, she only saw opportunities. And I think that is
Mm.
the optimism that rubs off on me each and every day. And that's one of the reasons I never say no.
Yeah, well, always important to have a grandmom or a granddad
Yeah.
who can who can give you more confidence in your early childhood. Agree with
Oh,
that.
and more
So
importantly, that's they help you like not take no for an answer. So, uh,
yes. So beyond mentorship, you also contribute to the community in other ways, and we touch on your policy work already a little bit. So I like to explore a little bit more this broader social impact that you may have, right? Having different hats, not just as a CEO, but as an advisor, maybe as a mentor as well, other people, being involved in efforts like the UN AI Advisory Board. So, how do you see those broader engagements and initiatives align with your personal mission? And is it important for you to, because you have a very busy life, of course, to be able to kind of give back in a way or another?
it is. I don't. It's. There was a very interesting saying, and I'll see like if I can remember. Uh, it's really around not what you do for people, but what you help people become. And I think
Yeah.
a lot of that is dictated by how you show up for individuals. And the legacy is really around what did you enable them to become. So my hope is that my work not only influences individuals to start seeking more, doing more, but becoming
Mm.
more. Because in this new world of AI, as you so well
Yeah.
articulated, it's not just about your technology skills, it's also your human skills. And I think that
Yes.
that legacy is going to be all about how do you inspire people to continue creating new frontiers of technology, continue betting on themselves, and continue disrupting new spaces. And a lot of that is, I think, the legacy that I want to leave.
Mm. And in your spare time, if you have any spare time, Navrina, what are the causes or one cause that you dedicate some time on, maybe beyond the business? I mean, right? In terms of whatever it is, in India, in the US, globally.
So I'll one jokingly and one serious. My cause right now is my 11-year-old daughter. So I do spend a
That's a big
lot,
cause indeed. Yes.
but that's a very important cause
Yes.
because I want her
Yes.
to grow up
Yeah.
to be a independent human who can just embrace technology, but also try and solve big problems. But jokes aside,
Yes.
I do spend a lot
Yeah.
of time not only seeking but guiding founders
Mm. Mm.
because as you can imagine, founder journey is a lonely journey and you have to
Very
really
much.
love yourself and bet on
Yes.
yourself because everyone day in day out is saying a no to you. And as you
Yeah.
can imagine, it not only gets lonely, it gets very demoralizing. So
Yeah.
I think really showing up for other entrepreneurs and especially female entrepreneurs is something that I spend a lot of
Mm.
time right now, either coaching, guiding, or just being present for
Yeah.
them. And that has become, I would say, a really important cause that I would love to continue giving back to investing in women-led startups, women-led companies more and more in the coming
Yeah.
years.
I love it. I so much believe, like you, that this kind of time you can give back to some mentees or people, particularly those who have less access to probably role models, is important. I'm trying to do that a lot with my foundation as well, with young entrepreneurs. By the way, one out of two happen to be women as well, but not only, coming from all kind of backgrounds. It's always a big learning moment, actually. Not just coaching them, but learning from their views of the world, and it gives you some insights on what the real world is and not just what we see from our bubble sometimes.
This
So,
reverse mentoring is so important because you're so
yes.
right. It's not just what we give to them, it's what we learn from their worldview is so different than ours. And so I
Oh, yeah.
love learning from young founders as to how are they solving the problems.
Yeah. So, continuing and almost getting into our very last couple of questions, Navrina, love to understand the way, given all those, vibrant responsibilities, activities you drive every day in your life, including your 11-year-old daughter as well, most important cause, I'm sure. How do you take care of your own well-being, right? What are the practices or habits you've that help you stay grounded, energized, resilient, and propagating obviously optimism and a positive energy with your teams?
Wow. I think I'll just bring it back home to, I grew up in a very disciplined environment. And as I was mentioning, I wake up at 3 a.m. every morning, and the time from 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. is my learning time. I am a
Okay.
voracious reader, love to read. Not only just areas of technology, business, but also, new things that, the book I'm reading right now is by one of my dear friends, Nicholas Thompson. It's called Running the Ground. It's his journey
Hmm.
of becoming a runner and his very
Yeah.
complicated life with his dad. And I think I always seek stories which continue to show me that the limits that we set for ourselves are basically in our own head and we can always go
Yeah.
past them. So I would say that reading is something that I hold very dearly, and I also hold very
Hmm.
dearly is getting access to the people who've written those books and the experts.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
end up spending a
Okay.
lot of time with the experts in the community to learn continuously from them.
Very interesting. And as you may know, we'll ask you actually after this episode a recommendation maybe on some books or podcasts you love. So, looking back to your career and leadership journey so far, can you share with us really at the top some of your key leadership lessons you've learned, and maybe something you wish you could actually tell your younger self, when you are just starting out, landing in the US?
Maybe I'll start with the second one. I literally, will go back and tell my younger self to keep betting on yourself and to taking that step
Mm.
because many a time in the noise of the world, we stop listening to our own voice. And I think that is a very dangerous place to be in.
Yeah.
So if I could go back 20 years ago, I'm so grateful for all the experiences that I've had, but I would actually
Yeah.
do startup sooner. I would take a bet on myself and my ideas much more earlier in my career. Um,
Yeah.
but the biggest lesson or, an inspiration that I've always had is you don't have to be great to get started. You just have to start to become that great.
Mm.
And I think
Yeah.
that bias towards action is such an important thing. My dad growing up would always say is don't admire the mountain, take that step to climb it.
Mm.
So for
Love it.
me, yeah, so for me, it's always been how can I take that next step, which might end up in
Yes.
greatness, which might end up in solving big problems. But in many a cases,
Yes.
it might just be a learning experience because it would be just filled with failures, but that's okay as well.
Love it. So my really last two questions, Navrina, looking at this mountain you just talked about, right? uh, the world is changing rapidly, and not just because of AI, but due to many converging challenges and opportunities. And you have a unique perspective that we discussed, straddling technology, business, policy. So I'd love to cap off our discussion by tapping into that. You know, when you look at the future again of AI, in this changing world in the next decade, what kind of future innovations or changes do you hope to see that will make AI a force for good?
I think it
I know it's a big question.
it is a big question, but not the one that I don't think about daily. I would say
Yeah.
investment in technologies that help you govern and build trust with this technology is so paramount. If you look at the amount of investments currently being made in just AI innovation versus safety and trust, it is really
Mm.
disappointing. We are spending or
Yeah.
investing less than 0.001% in governance,
Hmm.
in safety, in trust. And what I would love to
Hmm.
see is that in future it should not be an either or conversation, innovation or trust, it should be and conversation. How do we build a
Yes.
trusted technology that actually serves humanity? And a big part of that is going to be capital investment in this space, but also people investment in skills in governance and trusted AI technologies. And I think it's also the focus on how do you actually use this technology very, very responsibly, because as an
Yeah.
example, whether it is for kids who are getting access to this powerful technology, or we are going into election in a coming year, how is
Hmm.
AI going to be used in midterms is a big thing I
Yeah.
deeply think about. What is the source of truth? What can we
Yeah.
trust? We don't know yet, and I hope we do more investing in this space.
Okay, so now really bring that to an end. Finally, again, looking beyond AI to the bigger picture, we're living again, of course, in a time of massive change, whether it's technological shifts, climate change, or geopolitical challenges. So, as you think again about the decade ahead, what gives you hope? And in short, what is your vision for the future and the role of positive, values driven leadership in shaping that future?
What gives me hope is that we just have brilliant humans who are continuing to push the boundaries of AI innovation and trust in AI. And I think that just excites me because it goes back to something you said, which is
Yep.
the role of a human and what is very unique to humans, everything from empathy to creative problem solving is going to become paramount in this age of AI. So what gives me hope is that one, younger generation has started to learn AI much more rapidly. My 11-year-old uses
Yep.
AI day in, day out, but they're also finding solutions in very unique ways, which again
Mm.
talks about the creativity and solution mindset that humans have. So the future generation really gives me hope that I think we are in on the right track. Um, and then what was your second question? So sorry.
Well, second question is really about the vision for the future, the role of positive, values driven leadership, right, in shaping the future.
Yeah, I think I don't think this technology is going to serve us well if we don't have the right leadership qualities. And I
Yeah.
think this is where the positive leadership of really having high accountability, of really ensuring that we are keeping our objectives to make sure it is a AI is a tool that serves humanity in mind, but also how do we bring in the discipline and the hustle that humans are just so good at, to making sure that we very quickly learn this technology so that it again serves us. So I think leadership is, and especially leadership at some of these AI leading companies, is going to be really critical to show us what good looks like so that we can continue to reap the benefits from this technology.
Well, thank you so much, Navrina. It's been wonderful to have you on the podcast. It's been insightful, it's been passionate, it's been exciting. And I think you really made a great job defining what a responsible AI means actually for real people, hopefully. And so for listeners, please, if you love that episode, which I hope you'll do, leave a rating on the platform as well. 5 stars is always welcome, your comments, and keep subscribing to my Positive Leadership newsletter, the blog, and more. And we'll stay in touch. In the meantime, take care. Thank you so much again, Navrina. It was a wonderful dialogue together.
Thank you.